Whether you're in the market for an upgrade or if you're just looking to buy your first camera, this video is going to help you guys to learn the most important specs to look for when it comes to cameras, especially as it stands for landscape photography. Now, different kinds of photography can utilize different specs on the camera, so it's the best camera for landscapes likely isn't going to be the same camera that'd be the best for something like portraits or sports. I'm Austin James Jackson, landscape photographer based in Southern Utah. In this video, I am excited to compile a list of specs that are important when you're picking out a camera for landscape photography. Now, first and foremost, I want to mention that this video is not sponsored and I won't be forming a recommendation for just one single camera. There's a lot of photographers out there that'll tell you why one brand might be better than another, but in my opinion, the camera is simply just a tool. Each camera has strengths and weaknesses to help you get the job done. The best camera for you is simply going to be the one that fits with your workflow the best. Now, in this video, I'm first going to tell you the specs that I like to look for when deciding on a landscape photography camera. Then at the end of the video, I'm going to make a few recommendations across some of the most popular brands, hopefully helping you to make a more informed purchase decision. Let's start by reviewing some of the most important specs for landscape photography in order of importance. Now, first and foremost, the most important spec, in my opinion, when it comes to landscape photography is dynamic range and how much range the sensor has. Dynamic range refers to the difference between highlights and shadows in your image, and while this may not be as important for something like portraits where you can use a flash or another light to make up light in your scene, when you're shooting landscapes, you'll oftentimes be shooting in very low light, especially during sunrise or sunset where the sky is really bright, the foreground can be really dark. Having a camera with more dynamic range can enable you to recover more details in post-processing when shooting in RAW. Now, some of the best cameras on the market today have nearly 15 stops of dynamic range, which is plenty for almost any scene that you'd be shooting. Many photographers overlook the importance of having a sensor capable of capturing a very high dynamic range, since technically you can do a blend of images, often referred to as an HDR blend. This technique takes multiple images at different exposure values, which you can then blend together in post-processing. And while this is a good technique to use on cameras that lack the high dynamic range sensors, I do find this to be another step and just another place where you can get tripped up. This technique oftentimes will result in ghosting or halos around the edges of objects in your image. Now, with a camera sensor that can capture it all in one shot, you can simplify your workflow, get rid of the extra step. It's always preferable to me. Now, the next feature that I find to be crucial for landscape photography is low light performance. Now, ideally, I would always be able to gather enough light by slowing down the shutter speed and opening the aperture. Unfortunately, though, if you've been shooting landscape photography for long, you know this isn't always the case. Occasionally, you will have to tap into the ISO to properly expose your image. For this reason, you do need a camera that performs very well in low light. Despite all of the noise reduction software on the market today that works very well, you know, your Lightroom now has noise reduction, Topaz, DxO, all of those, I still want to have the best image quality available before going into post-processing. This is really important for a lot of the scenes that I shoot. Now, generally speaking, full-frame cameras are going to outperform crop sensor cameras by far when it comes to low light. So if you are looking for the best camera for landscapes specifically, I would recommend just ruling out all crop sensors from the start of your search. Now, the third thing that I'm looking for is megapixel count. There seems to be quite the debate about what the appropriate amount of megapixels is, but in my opinion, more is definitely better. The only downside to more megapixels is that it's going to take up more storage space, but that's a small price to pay for having those higher resolution files that do give me the ability to crop later on and print larger images with. Yes, I know there's numerous software on the market that will increase image size and resolution, but I still find it nice to have those megapixels in camera. Now, next, let's talk about size and overall feel of the camera, just some ergonomic things. As landscape photographers, we oftentimes will find ourselves hiking to locations. The smaller the size and weight, the easier the load is to carry, and or the more lenses and other equipment that we can carry in our bag. Now, the feel of the camera is another important feature, but it would be hard to find exactly the best feeling camera online without actually just trying cameras yourself. As a little example, I'll tell you, I used to shoot with a Sony a7R II and I upgraded to the a7R IV, which is 2 models newer, about like 4 or 5 years newer. And they received a really big upgrade to the grip, which made it more comfortable to use. So when it comes to the build of the camera, it can also be advantageous to have an articulating screen, especially ones that go in all directions. Generally, companies will say a tilting screen, which will, tilt up or down, versus an articulating screen, which will allow you to flip it around almost any direction you want. These can be nice when you're getting low to your foreground to shoot. It can be really nice to flip that screen up to see better. I will say a fully articulating screen is much better than a tilt. On my Sony a7R IV, I've got a tilting screen, which if I'm shooting in landscape mode can be nice. When you get low, you can tilt it up so you can see it. But when you're shooting in vertical orientation, if you're shooting like portrait orientation, you will not be able to see the screen because it only tilts one direction. It doesn't tilt back towards you when it's in that vertical position. So do keep that in mind. Additionally, I would make sure to get a camera with a viewfinder. A lot of mirrorless cameras you'll see will save some size and even some weight by not having a viewfinder. But for landscapes, it's nice to be able to use the viewfinder, especially when you're shooting out in that bright sunlight. It'll allow you to easier see your scene through the viewfinder than you would on the screen. Now, another feature that's becoming more common that I think will be a deciding factor is something called in-camera focus stacking. Different brands use different terminology, but essentially what it does is it focus stacks in camera for you. Shooting landscapes, you'll spend a lot of time focus stacking, where you can take multiple images at the same focal length with different focus points to merge together later for optimal front to back focus. This feature is now starting to become more common, and it automates the whole process, which speeds up your time in the field and even allows for handheld focus stacks. Now, if possible, you should look for a camera with in-camera focus stacking to save yourself time in the field. I don't have it on my camera right now, but I know I'm definitely going to look for it on my next camera in the future. Now, finally, I want to briefly mention the debate between DSLR and mirrorless cameras. I shoot on a mirrorless. I like the smaller size of the camera body, but the other advantages that we're used to seeing on mirrorless cameras don't generally matter too much for landscapes. Oftentimes, mirrorless cameras are going to see better video performance, faster and more reliable autofocus. These are both features that we don't really care too much about as landscape photographers. Now, with that being said, mirrorless definitely, in my opinion, seems to be the way of the future, so I'd recommend getting on the mirrorless train now while you can for that reason alone. Most of the major brands, it seems like, are focusing their efforts on building out lenses for mirrorless cameras more so than DSLR. We keep seeing the latest and greatest cameras are all being released on mirrorless systems. Now, I do want to mention two features that you are going to hear a lot of debate about that I don't think honestly make a difference. First one being weatherproofing. I know this sounds crazy. You guys are listening to this as landscape photographers and thinking, how does the weatherproofing not matter? Now, usually you're going to hear that the weatherproofing on Sony isn't as good as Canon or Nikon, especially Canon. People are really high and mighty about the weather sealing. That being said, I can tell you my personal experience. I've taken my Sony in some crazy wet monsoon storms, crazy cold conditions, negative temperatures. I've just never had an issue. This is my experience, however, and I'd be interested to know if you have had other results. Of course, there's 1,000 different people online with 1,000 different experiences, so definitely check into that if you want. The second feature here is the battery life. I don't think it matters as much as people make it out to be. Now, sure, having a great battery life is nice, but needing to throw an extra battery in my bag is not going to move the needle when it comes to picking out one camera over another. Additionally, as landscape photographers, we're not going to be as hard on the battery as someone who is doing something like portraits, who's constantly using that continuous autofocus and shooting in burst. When you're shooting on a tripod in manual focus or autofocusing and then switching to manual, you're really not going too hard on that battery, so it's going to last a little bit longer than expected. Now, as promised, I did want to make recommendations as of the time of this video recording on the three major brands, your Sony, your Canon, and your Nikon. Now, for Sony, the a7R V is going to be the clear winner for landscapes. It's got an optical viewfinder, 61 megapixels, in-camera focus stacking, nearly 15 stops of dynamic range, and a fully articulating screen. This thing's honestly a beast for landscape photography. Now, my Nikon recommendation is the Z8, which has a few less features than the Z9, but it's both cheaper and more portable. It's a little bit lighter. The features that you leave on the table aren't all that important for landscapes, in my opinion, and with just over 14 stops of dynamic range and 46 megapixel sensor, this camera should have you covered for landscapes. Additionally, for those of you coming from a DSLR, it does have that top LCD screen, which you're going to find more similar to your previous DSLR cameras than you will with the Sony. Now, additionally, Nikon is the only brand that can do shutter speeds longer than 30 seconds in camera, which is really convenient if you shoot any astro or just want to take some really, really long exposures with ND filters. My Canon recommendation is the R5 Mark II. Has a little bit less dynamic range than the Sony and the Nikon. From what I can find online, it looks like it's about 12 stops. It does have a 45 megapixel sensor though. If you aren't loyal yet, deciding between the three is definitely a challenge. While the Sony does have the highest resolution viewfinder and the most megapixels, it does fall short when it comes to continuous shooting. When it comes to the frames per second, again, I don't think this matters that much for landscapes, but if you are shooting something like wildlife where you want to do a really high FPS, the Sony is going to be the worst when it comes to the Sony, Canon, and Nikon, the three cameras that we're talking about. The Nikon can take longer exposures in camera, has about the same dynamic range as the Sony, but it falls short because it has the tilting only LCD compared to the fully articulating LCD on the Sony and the Canon. And the Nikon weighs over 150 grams more with the worst battery life of the three. Now, the Canon has the most autofocus points and the best battery life, but it comes up short when it comes to dynamic range. As you can see, each camera has pros and cons. Whichever camera you decide to choose, you'll be able to take some amazing images with any of these three cameras. Hopefully this video helps you guys to know what to look for when it comes to buying a camera for landscape photography. If there was anything that I missed or a spec that you'd like to look for, let me know down below in the comments. Additionally, if there's a camera that you're wondering about, let me know and I'll check it out and report back. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.